All right, welcome everybody out there in social media land. We are happy to be here again this Friday for another episode of A Youth Perspective. I am Dr. Kent Key, and we are the Flint Public Health Youth Academy. We have our dynamic youth interns here. Some of them are in college, some of them are in high school, and they're really here to share youth perspective regarding everything that is public health. And our motto is public health is everything, and everything is public health. And so we're excited to be here to really lift some topics around global health. But before we get into it, I'm gonna let the interns again greet everyone, just tell them who you are, a little bit about your fact today. Tell them who you are and maybe something that they would never know about you. Like, I'm Dr. Ken Key and I like yodeling. I don't. That was just an example, right? So do that. And then because we want to introduce our very newest intern, Melody Marsh. We'll save you for last, Melody, so you can greet the people and we can go from there. So I'm going to just popcorn to Everett. Everett will introduce himself and he'll call out someone. He'll popcorn and we'll save Melody for last. Go ahead, Everett. Tell the people who you are. Everett, is that a beard shadow going in? Oh my goodness. What's happening, man? What's going on, Everett?
So like you said, my name is Everett Graham. I am 17 years old and I am a junior at Southwestern here in Flint, Michigan. One thing about me is I like to play hockey. For those who didn't know that, I've been playing for a couple of years now. So that's an interesting fact about me. I'm gonna shoot it over to Cole.
Hi, I'm Cole Mays, and I am a senior at Cameron Ainsworth, accelerated class. One thing you might not know about me is that I play guitar. Let's go next.
Just call somebody, anybody.
Tomas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tomas Teo. I am not a fourth grader. I'm a fourth year at Genesee Early College with U of M Flint. Something interesting about me is I was a part of my church's mariachi band. I sung and played piano, and I also love to explore global foods. So I'm gonna pass it on to Kayla.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Shannon. I am a sophomore at the illustrious Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, studying political science, minoring in philosophy. And one fun fact that you wouldn't know about me is that I don't like chocolate. I think it's nasty. I don't know if it's like the texture, the flavor. It's just, it doesn't give. It doesn't give what it was supposed to give. So, and I'm going to popcorn it to Amir.
Hi, hello. My name is Amir Brown. I'm a junior at U of M Flint. A fact you might not know about me is I played piano for 5 years. So popcorn it off to last but not least, Melanie.
Hi guys, my name is Melody Marsh. Trying to think, a fact about me, I'm learning how to play bass. So Cole, it's cool that you know how to play guitar. I go to Genesee Early College, I forgot to say that.
Awesome. So I'm going to pass it on to Kiera, then to Khalil, and then to Dr. Bailey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiera Wallace. I'm one of the mentors. I am a second year evening student at University of Maryland, Carey School of Law. And an interesting fact, Kayla, you were talking about stuff you didn't like. I have a long list of foods I don't like because of consistencies. Okra is top of that list, actually, along with a bunch of other slimy foods. I don't like tomatoes and cucumbers and pickles, the whole nine. So yeah. I'll pass it to Dr. Bailey.
Thank you, Kiera. I was listening to you guys talk about what you don't like to eat. I love both of those. That's just different strokes for different folks. I'm Sarah Bailey, Reverend Dr. Sarah Bailey, and I am the administrative consultant for FIA. And something you don't know about me is since we're on music, I played the violin first chair while I was in high school. Yeah, how about that? And I will pass it on to Khalil.
Hey everyone, I'm Khalil. I'm one of the on staff and one of the youth mentors here. And fun fact about me, I guess, since we're all on music, I was in choir for 3 years.
Awesome. So we have a lot of artsy folk here, which I am loving. I sing and do music and been doing music and been over music departments for years. And so I think we might have to come up with a theme song. And then let Kayla put some spoken word Horn Cruz to it, and we'll make it do what it do. All right. So thank again, everyone. Monisha, you want to give a quick shout out? We're just giving shout outs to the audience before we get started. Just who you are and a fun fact that folk may not know about you.
Hey, I'm Monisha, and a fun fact, I like to watch reality TV.
Cool. Thank you. Briante, just introduce yourself to the audience, your name, and one fun fact about you that people may not know. Oh, he was putting his earpiece in. Did you hear me, Briante?
Hey, I dropped my earphones.
That's okay. We're just doing introductions. Just introduce yourself and give the audience one fun fact about you.
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Briante Brown. I'm an assistant GIS analyst and research assistant at Michigan State University. I am a fire mentor, and I am also a public health navigator with Michigan United. One fun fact about me is that, I'm allergic to a lot of food. That's fun.
Is that fun?
Not even close.
I hear you. I hear you. All right. So before we get into the show, I want everybody on the panel and everybody out there that's watching us virtually to go to your social media, like and share this link. We want to make sure that as many people as possible know that Flint Public Health Youth Academy is live and in living color. So go ahead and go to your Facebook, to your social media, like and share this link, and let everybody know that, hey, we're live right now. The Flint Public Health Youth Academy is going strong. All right. So today's topic, we've covered a lot of things since we started this talk show and this virtual platform. And the beauty that I like about this Youth Perspective show is the diversity of perspectives, even from the interns to our mentors to our staff. I love the different perspectives, and it just shows the multi-dimensions that we all make up in our humanity, which I think is the beauty of humanity, right? And so we've been talking about public health from so many different aspects, and we've been exploring it because, our motto is what? Public health is everything, and everything is public health, right? And so I want to kind of frame today's conversation to look at global health. We've talked about the water crisis. We talk about like national health disparities that we see. We talk about the impact of oppressive systems within the United States, but there are also oppressive systems globally. There's also global implications and global public health. So when you all first just think of the term global health, what tends to come to mind when you just hear that?
I think for me immediately, and maybe it's just because we have a lot going on right now, definitely like pandemics and the way that impacts people globally, as well as like war and the way that impacts people globally.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
Yeah, my thoughts are kind of similar to Kayla, especially with like the climate that we've been in, where like every time global health is mentioned, it's either like a pandemic or some sort of like conflict or war situation. When someone says global health, my mind automatically goes to like a negative sort of thing. It's never a positive thing. It's always like, oh, like what, is happening now that's gonna like hurt us.
Okay. Anyone
When I
else?
think of when I think of global health, I think of equity and inequities and how certain areas in the world have more privilege than others, and how other nations sometimes manipulate others. And that's what I think of when I think of global health is equity.
Anyone else? And when we think about global health and the various types of cultures, the various ethnicities, language, all of those things kind of tie into that whole thing, because I remember some of the conversations I was having with folk around the pandemic, especially there are individuals and people have historic reasons for believing what they believe, that, the government was conspiring on this whole COVID thing in the United States, but this was not just a United States only issue. This was a global pandemic. And so when we think about, and I hate this, I don't like classifications and categorizing groups of people, but one of the categories that's often used is first world countries and third world countries and those type of things. If you think about the impact that it's having on first world countries and third world countries, what are some of the disparities you think you would see when you compare first world versus third world countries?
One of the things that comes to mind immediately for me is access. The way that oftentimes, whether it be access to medical professionals, access to resources, access to accurate information, and that's in the US and outside of the US, because there's even disparities in whether or not there's access to information in your first language. And so I feel like access is a really big thing. And I also, as it relates to the pandemic, I remember it being a big thing that like we had to stay home, right? That we had to be separated. But I think also during the pandemic, what a lot of people didn't consider was the fact that it was a privilege for us as a more developed nation to be able to social distance. There are so many developing nations or nations that have larger populations than the US that were simply incapable of social distancing. You couldn't just go home, or it wasn't simple to just go home. Maybe that meant a commute, maybe that meant a bus if buses were down. If like there were so many things that I feel like we took for granted in the US, or we take for granted in general in more developed nations that have such major and sometimes catastrophic implications on the ability of people to access things that we can get easily.
Kind of to contribute to Kayla's point about the access of information, I would like to say the following of that information that is presented to you is a large difference between different nations and their responses to COVID. We've seen certain countries in Europe and Asia following the proper procedures and whatnot, and boom, lower COVID rates, lower death rates, and all of that. Well, we have countries like ours. Well, I know things are kind of, I don't know the current status of everything, but I know we were really high. And I know some places it's possible, some it's not. But I just think that the levels of ignorance and how that ignorance can impact governmental systems, I really think that that's a large disparity and, pressing concern as well. So.
Thank you. And Kiara, I want to kind of point this question to you, because we do have a law student, future lawyer, future judge, future Supreme Court justice. We don't know what Kiara may do, because she can do it all. But when we think about the role that the judicial system plays with laws and policies and enforcement of maybe protections or measures, what are your thoughts when you think about how different countries govern and how we're trying to combat the same pandemic, global pandemic, but you got different types of governing and procedures that people have to abide by. And politics in general, how that plays into it.
Okay, so first, to be clear, Kayla is our designated policy person, but I will indulge you briefly because I try to stay away from politics at this point. But I will say that I think it's quite apparent that the way that America does business, well, the way America governs is based on business. I'll start there. And so pharmaceutical companies and big corporations have a heavy influence because of how, they affect the economy and how they endorse candidates, and their message goes along with the candidates that they endorse. And when certain candidates are elected, their views and how they perceive things have an effect on how things are done. When Obama was in office, he did Obamacare. He, made every effort, possible to rolling back the information available for people to enroll, since he couldn't be able to. And the way that he decided to trust certain officials with information or gather information or make business decisions when the pandemic started, to not give information, or the information he was receiving. All of it was based on the people who he had next to him and the decisions that he thought was the best. And that was based on his business view of it. And I mean, you see, there were European countries who, shut everything down, and they got their rates much lower quicker than we were able to, because of the different way that we approached it. And then unfortunately, very big places like India, like Kayla was saying, where people could not socially distance and did not have the resources and the help to adequately care for people, how quickly they were dying over there. So, I mean, it all comes down to whoever's in charge and their view. But in America, it's always based on a dollar sign, is, the way I see it.
And I think Cole added in the chat that, some countries take it more seriously and some have really made it a political issue. And oftentimes it's all about the money. And so thank you for that, Cole, as well. So anyone else want to chime in about really their views on public health when you kind of compare like first world to third world nations? Because there were even some third world nations that did better at combating COVID than the US, even though the US had more money and resources, but because it was politicized and really used to divide races, to divide party lines, and to really stoke phobias and fears and conspiracy theories, that, it's some countries who don't even have as much resources that we have, and they actually are doing a better job combating COVID than what we are. Any thoughts about that? Amir?
So I think personally, like with I noticed like right now, like people are trying to like, take away some of like the mandates and stuff like that. Like, well, the like different like mask mandates and stuff like that. Like for example, my school taking away, it's making it optional for you to wear a mask or not or whatever. And I feel like we're like really like not like pushing on the gas. Like we're just letting our foot off the gas pedal right now, as far as like trying to combat it. And I know some countries, for example, like New Zealand, I know it's a smaller country, but it's still a country, but they actually closed down New Zealand after they had like a couple of COVID cases there, like not even like 10. They just shut it all down and put it in the lockdown. And so they're doing much better than we are right now. And they've been doing throughout the pandemic way better. And especially with death rates, they've been really seeing less death rates than what we have currently now in the US.
Great. Anyone else like to jump in before I go to the next set of questions? Great. So when we think about global health, that's really public health on a global scale. It's not just within one country or within one jurisdiction, right? Um, I think Kayla kind of answered this earlier when I talked about it with my initial question, but some of the things that impact global public health are things like pandemics and viruses, and she even mentioned war. Let's talk war. Before we get into it, when y'all hear the word war, like how do you feel? What's your initial feeling when you just hear the word war? Let's not get into the specifics right now. We're going to get into that. But when you hear the word war, what how does it make you feel?
Me personally, when I hear war, I often don't think of it as solely isolated in one area. I believe sometimes it can become everybody's problem because we talk about alliances like with NATO, for example, or with like trading and stuff like that, different like sanctions and other consequences can result from a war or conflict, you know, and those can impact other nations as well. So I don't, just like MLK said, the great man MLK, he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that's true. We might think that that's just a Ukraine thing, or that's just a Afghanistan, that's just here and here, but ultimately that could impact us as well. And I just think it's it's our concern. That's what I think of when I think of war. It's a global concern because public health is everything, and unfortunately, war can impact everything, especially when we talk about nuclear arms and stuff like that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I kind of have a, oh, you go ahead first, Kayla. Okay. For me, it was a little different. When I think about war, a lot of times I think, years back, thinking back to World War II, World War One, when in reality, it really wasn't that long ago, but that's where my mind kind of went when I thought about war. Completely not thinking about like the stuff in Afghanistan for some reason, like that just was like completely out of my mind. So me and a bunch of my peers were thinking like, oh, like there hasn't been a war in, years. Like, why are we doing this now? And it was kind of an eye-opening experience to kind of just think back on how things have been happening, not only in the US, but around the world recently. And it kind of like was a realization that this isn't something that we kind of lost. Like war has always been a part of like life for everyone in the world. And like, it sucks to say that, but this whole like situation and like the feeling that I get when I think of the word war, it kind of just like, it's scary to think that the whole time, me growing up, that there have been battles and wars being fought and they're not even like mainstream. Like they're all things that you got to kind of research to get any real details about.
Thank you. Dr. Bailey has her hand up.
Yes, when I think about war, I think about, oh no, another generation. Because war is not TV, it's real, it's deadly, people die, innocent people get hurt, people get maimed. And those are the kinds of things when I think about war. My father was in World War II. My cousins were, in the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of that. And my grandson was injured in Afghanistan. So when I think of war, I see some of the underbelly of it. When politicians look at it, they see the financial or business advancement part of it, that they get a chance to expand into another area, or they, if you have a contract company where you are making war machinery, you make money, so it's an economic thing, but for many of us, it's real and it's human. It's the people that, are left in a horrible situation.
Yeah, Dr. Bailey definitely took some of the words right out of my mouth. I think what initially comes to mind when I think of war is death. It's the life toll. It's the number of people, poor people predominantly, who are going to be fighting on behalf and really for the sake of egos that have nothing to do with them, land that they're not really concerned about, money that's never going to touch them. Like these are real people who are sent to fight battles, who are sent to defend things that oftentimes, once again, are unrelated to them. And if you think about it, like we go through cycles of war, because oftentimes before a war, if we look historically, people are enticed by the idea almost because time passes. And with time, generations forget what it really means, what the real impact and effect of this is trauma. This is generational. This impacts literally everyone. When we talk about public health, this impacts everyone. It doesn't impact only the soldiers who are going to be there. It impacts their families. It impacts their children. It impacts like them when they come back and then are forced to transition back into a society that's completely different from the one that they left. So there's so much that goes into it. And so sometimes, as I was saying, we go through this cycle where people almost forget how detrimental it is to us as a society to be in that sort of conflict. But then we get into it, right? And it happens. And then like Dr. Bailey was saying, it's a business. The materials, the amount of money, first of all, that America funnels into the military in general. Like it is literally, the Department of Defense is one of our largest corporations, our largest and most profitable corporations in the country. I think it's like number 2. So like war is a business, like don't get it twisted. They are not looking, their bottom line is not going to be the number of casualties. They are looking at the literal financial bottom line. And so for me, when I think of war, I think about all of the impacts that it has on people personally, and on us mentally as a society. And honestly, I vote that if some leaders want a war, they should have to box. I think we need to go back to how it was in the old days. Like, oh, you mad? You want that land? Fight about it. Get in the boxing ring. Why do other people have to die because you mad and you want some land? Nah, you go fight. I think we should have them do a standoff, because if you really was feeling it, and my point is, it wouldn't happen. If they had to risk themselves, it would not happen. But because it's so, they've distanced themselves so much from the people who are actually going to be impacted by it, it continues to go on. Exactly. Briante said in the chat, Wild West. 3 steps about face. That's what I think should happen.
Thank you, Kayla. And I want to echo Cole. He says he thinks of oil, because that's what countries are looking for. That's why they want geography, because geography has resources, oil. In Africa, wars have been over those areas that have gold mines and diamond mines, and it's been tribes and whole nations almost obliterated over that, which goes back to what Kayla says. Oil leads back to the bottom line, money. Diamonds and gold leads back to the bottom line, money. But when I also think about war, the first thing I think of is power. And then I also think of, but it's power for what? Because social justice is a war. We fight for causes. Like, the concept of fighting for something, unfortunately, does not always mean missiles. It doesn't always mean bombs and airstrikes and things of that nature. But unfortunately, there are different types of war. It's not always physical. Sometimes it's mental, psychological warfare. But then we have this unfortunate physical warfare, which often means violence in different types of ways. Sometimes it's the direct guns or missiles or bombs. Other times it's chemical warfare on people. We saw with the election, it being cyber warfare. And war manifests in so many ways, but let's talk more now about what's going on in Ukraine, right? So many things that we could lift from this. First, let's just talk about the implications on the country of Ukraine, and then we're going to dig deeper. Let's look at it from a public health lens. How is being in this war affecting the public health of those in that geography? It spreads beyond, but let's just start with that geography. Anyone?
I can go. I think that all of us here can kind of conclude that they are suffering there, having to deal with this pandemic and then being in a war or a battle or whatever you want to call it. Like something like this is just insane to even think about, especially with it being, you know, something that I won't say like happened overnight, but it was kind of the battle itself, you know, happened overnight for these people. Like 1 minute they just chilling, next minute, you know, they out here being bombed. People are, you know, invading their cities. Like it's just insane to think about that, how quickly things have changed for them. I wasn't too familiar on what like the pandemic was really doing in Ukraine or what they were kind of suffering from regarding that. But I can only imagine in any situation, whether they were, you know, handling it well or they weren't handling it so well, how something like this can, you know, negatively impact whatever it was that they had going on.
So I love when the babies get on because these are our future fire interns. So that's why I always like to see the babies. If the babies are around you all, don't be afraid to put them in the screen because we're raising up generations. Thank you for sharing that, Everett, that insightful perspective. And then you also brought out the fact that Ukraine is not just dealing with war alone, they're dealing with war, but COVID hasn't left just because the war is happening. Thank you for lifting that. Anyone else?
One thing that has kind of been on my mind is like right now I feel like our country specifically is worried about like gas prices and different things like that. Like I'm upset that I had to put $50 in my gas tank. Like what? And people in Ukraine are like without housing, are scared that they're not gonna live tomorrow, are not like gonna have their friends and family with them tomorrow and all these things. So it's just like we're really privileged right now. And a lot of us are stressing about all of these things that we're going through, not realizing that Ukraine is their country is being attacked like left and right. And it's just really sad to think that that's what our country is worried about is gas prices. And I say that I'm even falling victim of that because I'm upset. $50 for gas? Like what? But and then it's like bigger picture, Mel, like what are they doing in Ukraine? They're scared for their lives. It's just sad. I don't know. It sucks.
That's right. It's so much
Yeah,
to
I feel like
unpack. Go ahead, Tamar.
another way public health can be impacted is other public health crises can be birthed from that war. Like we have like Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant being threatened. So that's an environmental science crisis. We have probably the after effects and elements from the bombs being launched. Those are being impacted, and destruction of houses and have asbestos and different other things. So it's just more and more crises. That's all I see.
That's right. So there's a domino effect. And then I saw Dr. Bailey talked about the stress in the chat. So what about them? And Kayla called it out earlier. What about the trauma? What about the mental health trauma?
And that's exactly what I was about to say. Like, imagine the stress of every day waking up and not being sure whether or not like this is going to be the day, like regardless of your age, as a child, as an adult, like literally everyone there is concerned on a daily basis for their lives, like whether or not they're going to be able to make it from one destination to another. And once again, like we're in a pandemic. We are in a pandemic. So there were already mental health stressors and traumas that we were all dealing with, but now on top of that, to be in a war with Russia, like to have at all times for him to take this opportunity to be greedy, it's like insane.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Amir?
Well, on top of what Kayla said, I believe all the men or young men between like the ages of like 18 to like 50, they all have to stay there and basically fight, and then they, send the women and kids off and stuff to safer places. But that must be insane. Like a young man, like college young men, like early 20s young men, they have to go and fight. And some of them, they like are, being, tortured, blown up in like tanks and all the other type of stuff. It's just crazy to think like that young of an age demographic is having to like go to war when you don't really have any like experience in that. You're like an 18, 19-year-old young man and you have to fight and try to shoot people. That's trauma within itself to me. That's crazy.
And you bring up a good point, because we have had soldiers come back to the States that have been in war, and because of what they were forced to do and have to do, they have PTSD, they're having nightmares. Oftentimes they need mental health services because they're reliving these horrific moments that they've had to deal with. So thank you for bringing that. Everett?
Yeah, I think another point to bring up, and what Amir said kind of sparked this, is just that with all these young men being required to fight, this is also a war that nobody but the Russian government wanted. Like that, and I feel like that contributes to their mental health as well, or the public health of Ukraine, because like nobody was asking for this war. Not even like the people in Russia were saying, "Hey, yeah, let's go, capture Ukraine because we need this." Like that was not anything no one but the Russian government was, looking for. And that was kind of the hardest sort of thing for me to wrap my head around, where you got people in your own country saying, "Hey, we don't want this," but then you're still pushing forward and doing more and more every day, like in this war to hurt someone, when like the people in your own space say like, "Hey, leave them alone. Like we don't need none of that," but like you still carrying on. Like it was just really hard for me to like wrap my head around that.
And it's not even clear, like we say Russia wanted it, but I think the leader wanted it more than the country and the folk, unfortunately. And here's the other thing. When you talked about people being drafted, let's think now about historically. Who are the types of people that typically are the ones that get drafted and get put on the front line?
People that look like us.
People that look like us, poor people, people of color, right? So I call it the disposables. That's how they look at it. Those are the disposables, right? And are used to be sacrificial lambs. So even war, within the concept of war, you have racial and economically disparities of how people are selected. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, speaking of the racial disparities, like even the impact, that's a go in. The way that people are perceiving this situation, like even the fact that people, when you hear news broadcasters discuss this situation, like, I can't believe it's happening in Europe. Like, this is not Afghanistan. This is not Iran. This is not the Middle East. This is not Africa. Because if it was there, we'd understand. Like, it would make sense, because those places are supposed to be war torn, because people of color live there, because it's poor, because we've exploited the mess out of there. So it only makes sense that they would be in turmoil in the wake of our mistakes. But no, this is Europe. These are our neighbors. That's a Sarah. This is a Dan. I know them. Like, we go to church together. Like, it's disgusting. And they're like, frankly, like, this is not, because once again, this takes it back to people will be like, oh, racism doesn't exist anymore. Like, we're post-race. I don't even see race. But then something like this happens, and the way that it's being discussed, it's you can see the implications of race and just in the perception of the situation. Not only that, but to add a layer to it, the way that people of color in Ukraine are being treated right now, and you gonna tell me this don't have nothing to do with race? You gonna tell me we post race and yet they won't let them out the country, Ukrainians and immigrants alike? Like,
so you bring up a lot of stuff, Kayla. You bring up a lot of stuff. One, there are people, and I've had conversations with people from Middle Eastern countries who are saying, well, when war was happening here, it's overlooked like it's no big deal. But now that it's happening in Europe, it's getting all of this attention. Why is there a difference and a disparity in how it's being treated? One, because one area lives are viewed less than. We talk about the value system and how we value lives. But you're right. There have been several news clips. For those who are watching social media land that may not have seen them, search for them. There have been several news clips of African students that are in school in Ukraine and how they're being mistreated trying to get out of Ukraine like everyone else. One African male was even saying, it's okay that they're making us, the male, all males, stay, not be first in line to get out because they want the women and children. They're like, but it's women and children that look like me that are being treated worse than white men over there. And so I tell people all the time, just because we're in war does not mean racism evaporated or magically disappeared. It just doesn't happen. Someone had their hand up. Who was trying to go next? Go ahead, Amir.
Off of what Kayla said, that I saw some videos on Twitter. I think it was, I'm pretty sure, where they were like literally holding their arms out, stopping people from going on trains and other transportation like that, just to keep all of the Black people out. It was just crazy to me because and also I saw a clip where there was this newborn baby. It was pretty much just a few months old, a couple months old. They were restricting the mom and the little babies from getting on trains and other transportation to get out. And I thought that was really shocking because y'all are in a war, y'all want to make sure everyone gets out, then y'all doing this type of stuff. It is crazy to me how they're even racist throughout war times where everything's going downhill, everything's being torn up, blown up, and you still concerned about if the person is a different color than you, that they can't get on.
I know this might take things in a different way, but just listen to what Amir said. Reminds me of white flight out of the inner cities, war-torn inner cities, and white folks, they getting out and leaving Black folks in. And then once they figure out that now we really need to get back in the cities, then they want to throw Black people out of the cities, and then they want to come back into the cities. This thing, this monster called racism and how it affects people of color is so real, and it permeates into almost every area of our lives. War is no exception.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Tomas?
It's definitely terrible and traumatic, and the after effects of these events that are transpiring in Ukraine for sure. And it really kind of hits home the refugee thing, because in the Latino community, with people immigrating here and refugees within my community, I really feel for those people as well. One thing I find very ironic, though, is how the outpouring of sympathy is very different for different refugees and immigrants. My thing is, I think that all the issues that have happened in the world, whether it be in Latin America or the Middle East, everybody should deserve that sympathy. Just because you're brown or whiter, that shouldn't matter. Everybody should have the same care. Because I remember I've seen a news clip, and it showed, for example, a Ukrainian boy has traveled 700 miles to another country, and he's a hero. And then another article came for a Guatemalan kid, and it said that a South American boy, a Central American kid flees a country. Just kind of how people are looked more kind of praised than others sometimes, and like I said, I feel for everyone. I just think the outpouring of sympathy is just different for different people. And I'm not with that, because these are all humanitarian crises that all deserve the right amount of attention equally.
Well, and that's where in public health, we have to then hold the media. I told you everything is public health. We have to hold the media accountable for how they craft narratives and how they frame narratives. Because we saw this when Katrina happened, when New Orleans residents were called refugees. How you gonna be called a refugee? And this is the country that you were born in, but it's because they were brown and Black folk. So we have to be able to hold the media accountable for how they project narratives and they have to be responsible for the words that they use. One other example from New Orleans was when the residents of New Orleans was trying to cross the bridge to get to the Superdome where they were housing folk, and they had to stand off with the police. Y'all remember how the headlines read? Shootout on the bridge. Them people didn't have guns. They barely was able to wade through the water. The only people who had the guns was the police. But again, making those people look like savages or villains or criminals. And so we have to hold news media and that sector or that system, that industry accountable for the things that they do. Right before this war happened, wasn't it a whole bunch of people trying to flee the Middle East and come into Europe, and they was turning them away and said there was no room? But they found room for the Ukrainians. And I'm not saying that they should or should not. I'm saying, but it should have been room before this war if we were taking human beings in. And that to me talks about the global issue we have around valuing all humanity. That's a major issue. Is your hand up? Oh, okay. So anyone else? Anyone else want to jump in? We got about 10 more minutes and then we're gonna wrap it up. Any
I'll
final
hop in
remarks?
real quick.
Go ahead.
I think what you just said kind of speaks to like the monopolization of governments around the world. We see it a lot in America, but it just, brings out how it is in other countries as well. Like you said, they weren't having room for these people from the Middle East, but as soon as these Ukrainians who, for some reason, are looked to as more sophisticated or more civilized, they were able to make room for them and they were able to do all these things for them. But when things were happening in the Middle East or in Asia, they weren't able to look at them the same way. They weren't able to be as, charitable in a sort of way. Same thing when they were looking to other countries for assistance. Yep. When they started looking to other countries for like help, it was funny to see how like these countries were like, oh, like why isn't anybody helping them? They really all alone in this. Like they're not doing well at all. Like we need everybody to give this, give that. And then you look at these other countries like the Middle East, especially, nobody was saying that. Nobody was saying, hey, how about we give them this? How about, we let them come here? They wasn't offering these solutions when things were happening over there. But all of a sudden, when it's with these like people, they want to all of a sudden, make up all the answers. They want to, have all the resources to give. But for other people, it wasn't the same way.
And Tomas lifted up that good example with the Guatemalan kid versus, the Ukrainian kid. Like we see these disparities and they should not be. Go ahead, Kayla.
I was just going to say, I want to be very clear to everyone listening that it is not the case that we're saying our hearts go out to Ukraine. And this entire situation is insane, and war, regardless of where it happens, is traumatic and catastrophic and sad, and it breaks all of our hearts. I'm sure I can speak for all of us in saying that this is a horrible, horrible experience. And so I want to make it clear that, like, despite the fact that we are recognizing the racial nuances of this situation, it is not to say that Ukraine is deserving of this, or that like we think white people deserve war more than other communities. It's simply to bring attention, however, to the fact that there have been numerous other countries and people who deserve this attention. There have been plenty of other people who deserve the treatment that many Ukrainians are getting right now, and in the wake of this disaster. And so, despite the fact that like no one deserves war and it's wrong, the point is that equity should exist, good, bad, or the ugly. And the problem is currently it doesn't.
That's right. And we want to center equity, justice, and fairness for everyone, right? It goes back again to our value system, how I value myself and how I value others, right? that value system in America is not just a messed up race value system. We have a messed up gender value system where women are looked to be lesser than men in America. You can have a woman in the exact same job, have the exact same degree, have the exact same experience, and she can still make significantly $20,000 less than a male counterpart. These are things that are still real. It goes across gender, it goes across sexual orientation, it goes across religious belief, all of these disparities. But it's just coming across through the Ukrainian experience, the difference in racial treatment. And we know most of the disparities we see here in the United States have a lot to do with two things: race and socioeconomics. And so as a public health group, we oftentimes frame the various disparities and the various public health issues and crises that we see through what we call the social determinants of health. Because we see this stuff manifest in housing, in education, in the built environment, in transportation, in access to quality health care, right? In environment and built neighborhood, and in so many other areas that make up in food access, right? Educational access. And so these are the things that touch our everyday lives in so many ways. But today, we're just so happy that we were able to really look at this from a global lens and to see that racism is not just a public health crisis in America, it is a public health crisis globally. Socioeconomics is not just a public health crisis in America, it is a public health crisis globally. And until we correct the value system issue, where it's about power, and that power is normally driven by the greed for the bottom line, which is money. So that means I need to come in and take your oil, take your land to get your oil, take your land to get your gold, your diamonds. You know, Africa has been the most globally raped country in the world. I'm sorry, continent in the world. All the various, I think it's like 42 to 52 countries or something like that on the continent, raped for generations, not only of its people that were then sold into slavery, but of its resources and minerals and all of that. And I used to always say, when I was growing up, they made Africa seem like it was just a place you didn't want to go because all the kids had the bloated stomachs with the flies flying around and everybody was savages and acted like Tarzan. But I was like, if it's that bad, why have almost every European country gone over there and tried to colonize, have colonized and raped the land? Like, I don't understand if it's that horrible of a place. So we got to also think about the mind games that are happening with us. And this is all part of that global health conversation. Any parting words from anyone before we wrap up on this topic? Words of wisdom, parting words, anything. Go ahead, Amir.
So let me echo what Kayla said. That hopefully this war is doesn't go overboard and really get crazy. I know it already is, but prayers out to the people of Ukraine, and hopefully everyone is able to stay safe, and this will come to a very peaceful conclusion for everyone, and everyone is at peace of mind and everything. And yeah, so pray for everyone in Ukraine. And that's it. That's all I have.
So thank you all for your perspectives and sharing. These are my parting words. Human life is the most valuable gift that we can receive. And no one person, no one country, no one type of person, whether it's by race, gender, etc., has the right to take that from any other people. Our heart and our prayers goes out to every person that has lost their life in this war. There have been children in children's hospitals that have been killed, their fathers. These are fathers. These are mothers. These are children. This is uncles, aunties, grandsons, granddaughters, right? Our heart goes out to them. Let's be clear. But our heart also goes out to all of the other regions in this world where it's people of color who are being treated the exact same way and no one pays attention and no one does anything to lift a hand. Our heart goes out. The acquisition of land. Putin wants the land. That's the same thing that the European countries did to these various countries in Africa. And they were colonized and they had to fight these tribes. And our hearts should equally go out to all of those countries on the continent of Africa, who the only reason why people invaded them was because they wanted their land, because their land had the most valuable resources in all of the globe. So when we put this in perspective, the game ain't new. It's the same playbook. However, some people get more sympathy who are on the oppressed side than others. And when we talk about equity, and when we center equity in public health, we can't let that slide. So thank you all for being a part of this show, joining us for another episode of A Youth Perspective. I'm Dr. Ken Key. We are the Flint Public Health Academy. And remember, public health is everything, and everything is public health. Have a good evening. See you next time. Bye, everybody.